Thank you for joining. We will start the session. So today we are going to talk about disaster recovery as a service with a mutual solution of AWS and VMware. My name is Lir Schiff. I'm the VP Solution Architecture of TeraSky. I will introduce TeraSky in a minute. With me, Gregor, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Gregor Lagen, based in Stockholm, Sweden. I'm a business development manager for VMware Cloud on AWS for the public sector in the Nordics, including Baltics and for Benelux.
Great. So before we begin, some technical stuff about this webinar. So please submit all your questions by using the Q&A function, please, and not through the chat. We will monitor only the Q&A function. We will dedicate 10 minutes before we end our session to answer your questions. Questions which were not answered during our session, we will provide you answers by email, and of course we can do a private session or dedicated session with you after our presentation, to answer your open questions. So the agenda for today, I will introduce TeraSky, who we are, what we do. We are not going to introduce AWS. I guess everybody know who is AWS. We are going to talk about the solution itself, the VMware Cloud on AWS, which is the foundation for the DRaaS solution. Then we're going to talk about some common use cases of using VMware Cloud on AWS as a disaster recovery as a service solution. And we will talk about some design consideration, best practices for DR as a service solution. As we are familiar with in the field with our customers, we had a lot of implementation of such solutions. So we will share from our knowledge. So a little bit about TeraSky before we begin. So we are based in Israel. We are an Israeli-based company, around 100 employees. We founded in 2010, over 600 customers worldwide, with hundreds of projects. We also have our branch in Lithuania, covering our operations in EMEA, and we also have a branch in United States covering our USA operation. Most of our partners are here, what you see here. So we are focused from the cloud, public cloud perspective. We are an advanced consulting partner of AWS. We have a DevOps competency, migration competency, and we work on additional competencies down the road. We also are a Google partner. We are HashiCorp partners, so we are certified professional services to implement HashiCorp product within our solutions. We are heavily invested in the Kubernetes ecosystem, whether it's open source or some other flavors. We also partner with Red Hat, Portworx, Pure, Castine, Prisma, and Nutanix, Rubrik, and many other in the infrastructure field. And also one of our main partners beside AWS is VMware. We are a master service partner of VMware within all their competencies. We have master principal partner for all their competencies. And we were recognized by VMware as partner of the year for 2021 globally. Okay, so we have a lot of projects collaborating also both technologies, whether it's on-prem with VMware Cloud Stack and AWS, whether it's VMware Cloud on AWS or native AWS projects that we are delivering with our customers. So Gregor, this is your phase.
Thank you, Lir. So what I like to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about the solution as such, but what I like to do is start a little bit about the partnership between AWS and VMware. And this partnership started for this specific solution started some 4 years ago. And you might wonder, why did we do it? Well, it's actually driven by customers, because what both us and VMware saw was a lot of customers were looking for a hybrid cloud solution. And if we look at the private cloud part of the business, and of course VMware is the leader in that business, and if you look at the public cloud, then we are the leader in that segment. So it made perfect sense for us both to start cooperating. And what's important to point out that when we say that we have a partnership, that we're cooperating, it's not only a partnership where we resell VMware or we just have some other kind of loose partnership. It's actually a partnership where we jointly engineer the solution VMware Cloud on AWS. And there's a lot of benefits for you as a customer to the fact that it's a joint solution between us and VMware. So you can move to the next slide here. So what's in it for our customers? Well, basically, you can look at it as the best of both worlds. So you're probably running VMware today. You're very familiar with all of the tools. You're familiar with how to manage the environment. You probably have an organization that's set up to support your VMware environment. And if you look at VMware Cloud on AWS, you can continue using the same tools, the same processes, the skills that you already have in place. All of that stays even though you move to VMware Cloud on AWS. In addition, of course, you get all of the benefits of the public cloud. So the fact that you can scale rapidly, you can scale at a large scale as well. You have the capability of doing bursting. So if you have a sudden requirement for additional capacity, you can easily do that. You get all the cost savings that are associated with moving to the cloud. Of course, you are able to reach globally very quickly with a public cloud solution. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. You also get access to all of the services that we as AWS deliver. So there's some 200 services that we have. So next slide, please. Now, you don't have to worry that I'm going to go through all of this in this slide. This slide really goes to show that this solution was launched some little more than 4 years ago. But because of the partnership that we have with VMware, we're able to bring new features and new functions very quickly to the market. And these are just some examples. So there are examples where we expand into new regions. There are examples where we add new functionality. And there are examples where we introduce totally new solutions, like, for instance, VCDR, which you will hear more about later today. Next slide, please. And when we talk about the reach, we talk about the regions. So as you can see in this slide, so you can see both all of our regions that we have with AWS. And you can also see in which regions that we have VMware Cloud on AWS. So in the majority of regions, we have this service stood up. And I don't know if you're familiar with the AWS setup. So when we talk about the region is a geographic place, and every geographic place have multiple what we call availability zones. And an availability zone is one or more data centers. So for instance, since I'm Swedish, I know Stockholm very well. And in Stockholm, we have 3 availability zones. Now, of course, for AWS, security is key. So this solution, the VMware Cloud on AWS solution, inherits all of the certifications and everything that we have in place for AWS. So you can rest assured that this solution, that you have all of the right security in place and that you have all the necessary compliance in place as well. So next slide, please. Yep. So let's go through this quickly. So if you start by looking at your own data center, so your on-premise data center, where you're probably running VMware today. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're only using something like vSphere or if you're using the full SDDC stack from VMware. That is, vSphere, vSAN, NSX, etc., etc. You can always benefit, or you can always start using VMware Cloud on AWS. As you see in this solution, so VMware Cloud on AWS, it's the full VMware software-defined data center, including all of the different products running on AWS Global Infrastructure. And we run it in something that we call a VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud. As you can see, when you start using VMware Cloud on AWS, you're using the same tools that you already use today, which means that you can manage your on-prem environment, you can manage your VMware Cloud on AWS environment the same way. You can even have a single pane of glass for both of these environments, your on-prem and AWS. So it's very, very simple to manage. At the same time, as you see from this slide, we have another VPC. You get access to another virtual private cloud, which contains all of the native services from AWS. And don't ask me to name them all, because again, I think it's more than 200 services that we have available. One of the benefits of VMware Cloud on AWS is it's very simple to integrate between your VMware environment and the native services. So let's say, for instance, that you're running VMware Cloud on AWS, but you want to optimize your storage. Maybe you're looking for some more low-cost storage. Then you simply connect into the other VPC, contain the native services, and start using Amazon S3. Or you may be running, let's say, an Oracle database in your VMware Cloud environment, and you decide you want to have a managed Oracle service instead. Well, same thing, it's very simple. So sometimes when I explain this, it's like having all of the native AWS services in your own data center. Because when you start integrating between your VMware environment and the native services, it's simply a fact of some network settings using what we call the Elastic Network Interface and some security settings, and off you go. We have access to all these services. So next slide, please. So what are the benefits? So the way this is set up, it's a service, as I said, it's jointly developed, but it's managed by VMware. And for you, the benefits of that, since you're probably already a VMware customer, you probably already have contacts there. So if something happens, VMware is probably your first point of support. That's the same thing here when you start running VMware Cloud on AWS. So it's an environment that's managed by VMware. You get operational consistency. So the tools you're using today in your VMware environment, they stay the same. You use the same tools. So all your manners of operating your VMware environment, you can continue to do that with VMware Cloud on AWS. You get workload portability. Well, and for many people, that's very, or many customers, that's very important. The fact that you can simply move workloads from on-prem to the cloud, move from the cloud and back on-prem. And since this is based on VMware, it's basically a vMotion operation that you do. So you get true portability. So there's no lock-in factor whatsoever with this solution. So I talked a little bit about native integration, how easily you can get access to the native services from AWS. So again, things like storage, things like analytics, things like database services, etc., etc. Very, very simple integration that needs to happen. And then, of course, what we often see is that customers view this as a first step. So they quickly move into the cloud by using VMware Cloud on AWS, and then they start looking at optimizing. So maybe looking for new technology to build more modern applications, etc. And of course, they can do that very easily if they use VMware Cloud from AWS and get access to our native services. So next slide, please. So let's look at some of the use cases. So the first one is very straightforward. If you want to migrate to the cloud, this is and you're using VMware today, this is the absolutely fastest way that you can move to the cloud. And if you want to oversimplify it a little bit, it's like doing a drag and drop of your workloads from your existing VMware environment into the VMware Cloud on AWS environment. Second use case is data center extension, and that's for customers that are looking for, maybe they have certain requirements for certain environments, let's say test dev, etc. They can easily use the cloud for that instead of investing in lots of infrastructure on-prem. It may be that they only need it for a short period of time. So why invest in infrastructure if you can only go into the cloud and basically get pay as you use it? Some customers are also using this as a buffer. So I mean, it's very hard to predict what kind of or how much resources you need. So typically what customers will do is that they will over provision on-prem, so they basically have lots of excess capacity just in case. Well, if you're using VMware Cloud on AWS, you don't need to do that. You can size for normal, and then you know that if you need more resources, those resources are available in the cloud instantly. Third topic, so disaster recovery, and Lear will cover this in much more detail, but it's an area that we see a lot of customers interested in. It's probably one of the hottest areas right now, and the cloud can bring a lot of benefits to your disaster recovery solution. But again, Lear will cover this much more in detail. And then again, next generation applications. So for customers that really want to modernize their environment, but they're not ready to do it right away. So maybe as a first step, move the VMware environment, VMware workload to AWS, and then start migrating or start exploring new opportunities by using new services. Next slide, please.
I just want to add that this is an official slide of VMware and AWS, and those are official references.
Yes.
We as TeraSky, we were implemented the Playtika and 888 holding projects, by the way. So yeah. Small comment.
Cool. So final slide. So if we look at disaster recovery, we look at the use cases and why the cloud and AWS has an important role to play. I mean, there are a number of reasons. There are customers today that have a DR solution that they feel it's not really up to date. It may be complex, it may be expensive, so looking for ways to modernize it. There are other customers, and many customers actually don't really have a DR solution in place. And of course, DR, it's probably not the favorite topic because it's like an insurance. You know you need it, you really don't want to pay for it, and in worst case, when you create your DR solution, you end up with maybe a facility, some infrastructure that's only sitting there doing nothing except costing money. So a lot of customers are now looking to the cloud. How can we optimize our DR solution? And again, Lear will go into detail on how we can do that. But I think that one of the most important things when looking at DR solutions is the automation factor. Because if you create a solution that's for DR, that's fairly complex, and maybe you find it complex and hard to operate under normal circumstances. Just imagine what it's like when you're in a disaster situation. So automation is key, and the capability of testing your DR is also very important. When I'm sure Lear will cover that. And just if we look at DR, so DR, I mean, it's been around forever, but basically before joining AWS, I was at Cisco, and before that I was with EMC. Of course, EMC will be a lot of EMC was built on the fact that the DR was needed. So it's an area that I know very well. But I would like to add that we see a lot of interest in DR, especially driven by ransomware. So that's something that's popping up everywhere. And when Lear goes through, for instance, VCDR, you'll find that this is an excellent solution that will allow you to roll back easily to the points in time before you're hit by the ransomware attack. Yeah, I think that's for me. That's it for me, Lear. Have I forgotten anything?
No, thank you.
I've been talking too much.
No. It was right to the point.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So from the general overview, let's deep dive a bit for the disaster recovery as a service solution and the architecture and how we approach such a project. So first, before going to design any DRaaS solution, we need to define some business KPIs. And when we are talking about disaster recovery, there are two main business KPIs that we need to understand. What are the definitions? So RPO, the recovery point objectives, basically means that this is the amount of time that I allow to lose data. Okay, so if my RPO is 4 hours, it means that when I bring up my DR environment, I take my organization 5 hours back. So I lose 5 hours or 4 hours of transactions, of incoming traffic, of whatever changes that I did on the organizational applications. The other aspect is basically the RTO, or recovery time objective. Recovery time objective is basically a business definition of how much time do I allow myself to reconstruct the actual applications, meaning how much time it takes me to bring up the DR solution into a situation where when my application is running and serving the business. Okay, so if my RTO is 24 hours, it means that within those 24 hours, I need to be able to bring up my infrastructure, bring up my applications, and bring it up all back alive. And if I have applications that are exposed to the internet, or I have some external users that need to log in, so they will be able to actually log in within those 24 hours. Those definitions are very important to define before we design the project, because it have a direct impact on the technologies that we're going to choose in order to implement this kind of DR solution. So, for example, if I dictate that I want a 0-second RPO and the lowest RTO as I can, so maybe I can take an approach of application level solutions. So, for example, Exchange DAG, or SQL log shipping, or Microsoft Active Directory replication, or Oracle Data Guard. So those solutions are based on each application and allow me to lose a small fraction of the data and bring my application up and running very fast. But this is the pros, but the cons is that each application is managed differently, and it's very hard for the IT manager to orchestrate everything, and every team have his own responsibility on his application. So it's like a distributed management of a DR scenario, which can be very complex to manage and run. Another approach is 0 RPO, 0 RTO. I don't want to lose any data, and I want to reconstruct my infrastructure and my applications as fast as possible in a matter of seconds if I can, or minutes. Okay. For those kind of solutions, we usually see an active data centers approach from the infrastructure perspective. And within VMware Cloud on AWS, it doesn't regard any DR solution that I'm going to talk about, but within VMware Cloud on AWS, we have an option to do a stretch cluster between two availability zones. So VMware Cloud on AWS basically based on vSAN, and vSAN have the capability to be stretched and provide us some kind of a sync replication between two clusters, two geographical locations. In that case, in AWS, it's two availability zones. So imagine that I have one vSphere cluster spread across to AWS availability zones. It's a very unique solution to have that level of redundancy or resiliency for the infrastructure in AWS. Another solution that VMware offers is basically, maybe most of you are familiar with, is the vSphere application and the Site Recovery Manager, or SRM. With SRM and vSphere application, I can basically provide a minimum of 5 minutes RPO. And you know, RTO is very dependent on the magnitude of my organization and the amount of application that I need to bring up. But basically, I can automate everything and orchestrate everything with the Site Recovery Manager. So if you know, my RPO are 5 minutes, and my RTO is, for example, 4 hours or 10 hours, then I probably will use SRM, which is come as a service with VMC, okay, with VMware Cloud on AWS. The other solution that VMware and AWS introduced is basically VCDR, or VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery. It's a VMware product that's been purchased, or it was an acquisition of a solution called Datrium a couple of years ago, and it's been integrated into a VMware ecosystem. And I will explain about this solution later in the presentation. I will use that, DR as a service, or VCDR, when my RPO is minimum 30 minutes, and my RTO is pretty similar to what I have with SRM, so a couple of hours to bring up all the infrastructure. Obviously, it depends on the amount of virtual machines and services that I have. It can be from minutes to a couple of hours to bring up the infrastructure. So I will elaborate more on those two technologies and what does it mean and how we implement it. I will be more focused on VMware Cloud disaster recovery, because this is the main topic of the presentation. So first solution is SRM. Most of you are familiar with SRM. I'm not going to elaborate more on the technical aspect of SRM, but basically when you launch a SDDC instance within AWS, you get SRM and vSphere application as a service from VMware. So you will be able to leverage this technology against your local vCenter, and then replicate all your VM and orchestrate your entire DR operation. The second and most interesting solution is the VCDR. So VCDR is very interesting in its concept because it allows us to enjoy the benefits of the cloud. What I mean? Gregor said before that customers are approaching to the cloud because they don't want to pay on a DR solution which they are not utilized on the day-to-day. So they really like, customers really like the approach of the cloud. So if you don't use it, you don't pay for it, right? So we want to provide some kind of a solution that will be optimized to those demands. From one hand, we'll provide a full DR solution, orchestrated and production ready, and from the other end, will be cost effective. The way to do it is basically to replicate the entire data of the virtual machines into an S3 bucket. Okay, so S3 bucket is object storage offering from AWS. It's not the most expensive storage that we have in AWS. It's not a block storage or SSD storage. It's an object storage optimized for huge amount of data with optimized cost. So we want to replicate all our data into S3, and only when we need to launch our actual DR within AWS, then we want to bring up the VMs from this S3 bucket, and then we will have a live DR infrastructure up and running in the cloud. So we will pay on the compute portion of the solution only when we need it. So we will save the VMs and all our application in a cost-effective storage on the day-to-day. And only when we have a DR scenario, we will bring up the compute, connect the storage into this compute cluster, which is basically a vSphere cluster, and then bring up the VMs and start, our DR recovery process. So how VCDR is built from a couple of major components that I want to introduce now. So the first component is the DR as a service connector, which are basically it's an OVAs that you are implemented within your on-prem vSphere clusters. It communicates with your on-prem vCenter, and also it communicates with the cloud service of VCDR in the cloud. Now, what is this cloud service? So in this cloud service, we have two main services. First is the SaaS orchestrator. The SaaS orchestrator is the management plane of the entire solution. Through the SaaS orchestrator, you configure your DR as a service connector, basically all your on-prem assets that you want to protect with VCDR. And you also run the DR runbooks and do the tests and failovers and failbacks and all the features that we have with VCDR, all managed with the SaaS orchestrator. The scale-out cloud file system is basically behind the scene is S3, but it's not just S3. It's some kind of a file system that it's some kind of a proprietary file system of VCDR that behind the scene knows how to translate a VMDK file into an object within S3 in a very optimized manner. So also you will be able to replicate deltas, between the on-prem and the cloud. You don't want to do a full sync all the time. You need to replicate. You want to do the baseline first and then replicate all the changes. So the scale-out file system allow you to do it. In addition, the scale-out cloud file system allow you to map or mount this file system as an NFS data store into VMC. Okay, so when you have a real DR scenario, you through the SaaS orchestrator, you bring up the SDDC cluster. The orchestration is automatically mount the file system, the scale-out file system into your SDDC instance. So it's appear like as a regular NFS data store from your vCenter in the cloud. And then you're able to bring up the VMs and start the recovery process. Okay. In addition, you can do it for a DR test scenario. So, for example, you don't have a real scenario of DR, but you want to test that your DR is actually working and that your teams are capable of delivering this process of bring the organization into a DR scenario. So you want to test the environment maybe 1 or 2 times a year. So VCDR have the capability to bring up this infrastructure without any connectivity to the on-prem. So you can bring up the infrastructure in the cloud, test your application like in a bubble. Then you test your application, see that everything works. You see that all your protocols are intact and your crews your teams are trained and able to do what they need to do in order for this DR to be operated. And then you eliminate the tests and and delete the compute in the cloud. That's it. Okay. So everything is orchestrated through the SaaS orchestrator. It's a very good solution for that purpose. Also, we have a failback option. So if you do a failover, an automatic failover to a DR scenario, now your on-prem is back to life and you want to fail back. So you are able to reverse the replication direction back to the on-prem, sync only the deltas, or do a baseline if you install your entire on-prem from scratch. So you do the baseline and then you do a failback to the production site, and eliminate the instance in AWS. So it's very convenient in terms of all the DR orchestration that need to be done. It's very cost effective because in the day-to-day you keep all your data into an S3 bucket, which is a cost-effective storage, and it's very easy to bring up to life because you have your data there. You deploy the SDDC. It's up and running within 90 minutes. The orchestration will connect the storage into the compute, and the orchestration also will bring up the VMs in the order that you dictate in advance that you want those VMs to brought alive. Okay, so very similar to the concept of SRM. Okay, it's very similar. Now, for most of the use cases, we see that VCDR is actually a good fit because not all of our application in the organization need this low RPO. We see some highly critical databases or highly critical payment application need an RPO of 5 minutes, but most of the tier 2 and even a tier 1 applications usually organization define 4 hours or 2 hours RPO, and VCDR will cover all those use cases. And for those like 5, 10 applications that are major critical and you really need a 5 minutes RPO in the cloud, we will recommend to use Site Recovery Manager and vSphere application. So this is a high-level solution architecture that we did for one of our customers. In this case, it was based on basically on SRM because the business required 5 minutes RPO for all the applications. But what I wanted to show you here is basically when we designed this solution. So basically, when you design a DR solution which is on-prem, and whether it's in a hosting facility or something that you built yourself, you don't have a cloud provider in the end of the road. It's like it's your own equipment. You can do whatever you want, and this is a traditional way. Now, when you do a DR as a service, so the destination is basically AWS, and AWS have their own rules and they have their own products for networking and security, and there are special ways to configure communication between your on-prem and AWS. There are some stuff around routings that we need to figure out and understand. So it's not straightforward. We do need to do some thinking here. So everything that regarding security and networking is very important. Another critical aspects that you need to understand is that we are using NS6 here for data center firewall. So customers can bring their own firewall, but this customer, as an example, used NS6 on-prem, so it was very easy for him to adopt NS6 in VMC, but it's not mandatory. So what we did here is basically they have their on-prem environment. First thing we need to do is basically they had a physical F5, so we needed to migrate the physical F5 into a virtual F5 because they wanted to use the same F5 in the DR. So I cannot do like replication of physical F5 to virtual F5. It was more convenient, to migrate it to a virtual one, and then have another virtual one here. Another thing that we needed to do is the Fortinet firewall was the data center firewall, so we needed to also convert it into a virtual firewall. Now, this customer wanted to have a direct access into AWS data center because they want 5 minutes RPO. They needed high amount of bandwidth, to define the line between the on-prem and AWS data center. In order to do it, we were using AWS Direct Connect. Okay, so we needed to choose a AWS partner that support Direct Connect, and we choose Equinix. So we were able to create a direct connectivity between the on-prem and AWS data center, where the VPC is relying on, in order to provide them that amount of bandwidth. We needed 10 gigabit of bandwidth in order to meet this RPO. In addition, this is these customer applications serving their end customers on. It's an online games. So basically, what they needed to do is when they have a failover between the applications here and to the VMC data center, they wanted to maintain the same IP addresses within the data center. It's very complicated to do it on a native AWS infrastructure, but with VMC it's very straightforward. You just keep the same IPs, and the only manipulation that we need to do is change the public prefixes to come through the internet to the router in Equinix, going to the physical firewall Fortinet to filter the traffic, and then go into the VMC data center in order for the applications to serve data. Okay, so this architecture is basically the final architecture. It took a long time for the customer to understand what we are trying to achieve, how we change the actual way that how we change or modify his existing network architecture. The security architecture also need to be changed a little bit. The way that the firewall is serving data and serving traffic, and how the F5 is built. So it's very important to look at it as an overall solution, not only a solution for compute and replication. So some design consideration and practices that we see. So when you do a TCO for a DR as a service solution, so it's very nice to dream that if my DR is not operative, then I don't pay for it. Okay, it's very nice, but what you do need to take into consideration that you usually want to do a DR test. Okay, now when you do a DR test, you actually bring up resources in the cloud. When you bring up those resources, it costs money. So when you do TCO, you have to take into consideration how much tests you want to do per year, and for how much time those tests are going to be live. Okay, so we had a customer that we did a TCO exercise with him, and he told us, okay, I want my 100% of the application up and running in the test, and my test takes about a month. Okay, so imagine, and I do it twice a year. So imagine that for a whole month or whole 2 months, I have the entire infrastructure up and running in the cloud 24/7. Okay, just for DR test. I need to be able to anticipate those kind of workloads and consider it when I do the financial exercise or calculating my TCO. If I missed it, I might be very drifted from my original assumptions of pricing. End-to-end DRP solution. So obviously you have to understand the entire flow of the DR solution. So where is your end users are located? How do you have your internal employees, how they will access into the cloud with their laptops, right? Just to do the day-to-day operations of creating this DR drill or the actual DR scenario. Look at networking and security, like the example that I mentioned before with the customer that we did the project. It's very important to see the entire solution, not just how we orchestrate the actual movement of machines between on-prem and DR. There are some functionalities that are not covered by VCDR or other solution in that space. So if I have file services, like if I have NAS appliances like NetApp, Pure, or whatever, EMC, we have to take this under consideration and understand how we collaborate those into our DR scenario as well. So it's part of the end-to-end DRP design that we need to take into consideration. Another thing that customers sometimes forget is the data protection. So let's say that I do a DR scenario and I'm going to be operational in the DR for a month or for 2 months or for how much time it will take me to bring up my on-prem again. Do I need my data protection solution in the cloud or not? So if I use Commvault or if I use Veeam or if I use Rubrik, then I need to understand how do I protect my workload when the DR become operational. When the DR become my production, I need to protect this data as well on the day-to-day. So it's something that we also need to design how the data protection solution will be implemented in the cloud, right? So it's something that we usually tackle with customers. There is those physical servers concern, so obviously VCDR and SRM does not support physical servers. So we need to figure out a way to provide a DRR solution in the cloud to applications running on physical servers. All right, so it's a challenge by its own. We have to considering licensing model. So if you have a physical server running Oracle, right, and we know the constraints of Oracle licenses on top of virtual environment. So when it's on-prem and physical, great. You are choosing to use DataGuard in order to do the replication to the cloud, great. Now in the cloud, if you choose the infrastructure of VMC, so it's going to be an Oracle VM running on top of a cluster of ES6s. You have to make sure that this cluster is licensed for all the cores within the cluster. Okay, so we have to design accordingly. So we have to look at our applications, the license model of the application, and design maybe a separate cluster only for Oracle workloads, only for MS SQL workloads. So it's stuff that we need to take under consideration. So there are some old operating systems which are, not supported, but because it's VMware, so you can replicate the virtual machine of Windows 2000 to VMC. It's not a problem, but you don't have any support for Microsoft or for VMware if something happened to the operating system itself, but it will work. Native AWS product know-how. So if you plan to do a DR as a service and you want to do it with VMC, please make sure that your team is qualified and understand how to architect and also run and maintain operations in the public cloud. Because it's, as you saw in my previous slide, there is a lot of networking aspect and security aspect and some operational stuff that need to be, you need to know how to design and maintain in the cloud, which is not VMware stuff. It's AWS stuff. So just educate your team before you implement this kind of solution. So we have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions? Let's see. The Q&A. Right. So we have. If I use VCDR, can I also use the VMC compute nodes for other use cases? Yeah. So VCDR basically, VCDR is the solution that replicate the data to the cloud and orchestrate your DR on VMC. In order to do it, you probably most of the organization are bring up the minimum amount of nodes in VMC required for a basic cluster, which is 2 nodes, which are 2 nodes. So those nodes, whether they are 2, 3, 4, or 10, doesn't matter. It's actually a operational vSphere cluster. So you can run anything you want on this compute and utilize this compute for day-to-day use cases, applications, whatever you want to run there. So it's totally up to you. It's, you know, you paid for it, so you can actually use it. Do we need to adjust our automation tools or infrastructure as a code tools in a DR scenario to work against AWS console? No, basically it depends. So if your automation tools, whether it's vRealize automation, Terraform, Python, or whatever tool you are using to automate your infrastructure deployment, so probably it runs against vCenter if you want to bring up VMs in VMware. So basically, what you have in VMC is another instance of vCenter. So it's totally independent. It manages only the compute nodes in VMC in the cloud. And when you do a DR, and your DR is now the production for a long period of time, and you want to do, you know, your entire deployment process are relying on those automation tools, you have to point them into the new, you know, to work with the new vCenter. It's like a new endpoint that you need to configure. So it's an adjustment that you need to do. We can basically automate it by, you know, put it into the orchestration workflow of DR failover. But it's a good question. It's stuff that you need to consider it. Disregard of AWS console. You are not approaching AWS console in any case. Okay, it's a completely different management plane. Our current disaster recovery are used for test and dev. Can I do the same with VCDR solution? Yeah, so it's the same answer as before. Basically, yeah, I see a lot of organizations that uses their DR solutions instead of just drop some hardware there that do nothing. They use it for test and dev to utilize this extra hardware. You can do exactly the same in VMC. Now, the beauty in VMC is that, you know, once you add more workload to the cluster there, then the infrastructure automatically, you know, discover that you're out of resources. And when you hit that threshold, VMware will add automatically ESXs into the cluster. All right. So you can throw a lot of virtual machines there, whether it's test or dev, or now you are in a DR scenario, so you need to bring up, you know, hundreds or thousands of VMs in a matter of minutes or hours. Then you know, VMC is smart enough in order to figure out that you need to add more resources, and it automatically will scale with more ES6s. Now you will pay only for the portion of time that those ES6s were added. Okay, so in that portion of time, you can eliminate your DR. You can eliminate your or power off your test and dev workloads, and you know, serve only the DR. Now, when you don't need the DR anymore and you do a failback, then you can just, you know, delete or shut down or, you know, unallocate those ES6s and shrink back into a minimum deployment of VMC in the cloud, and you will pay only for the amount of time that those extra ES6s were powered on. All right, so this is the magic that happens behind the scene. This is one of the greatest features of VMC in general. Disregard disaster recovery use cases. I think that's it. So thank you very much for your time, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, Gregor.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for taking time.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.